All right, we are back here on the podcast. The MLB regular season is over. The Yankees are still playing, getting ready for the Wild Card Series tomorrow against Boston. The Mets are not, as they have been caught and eroded away one of the best starts in franchise history. Join me today to set the stage for the MLB postseason, particularly on the Yankee end. Great friend of the podcast. We talked to him before opening day. Anthony McCarron is back with us. Anthony, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good. I have to say here, like, if you like, honestly, like, I know we get to the Yankees in a minute because they're still playing and they have a lot to be proud of for how they finished the year here. I think the story of the moment, would you agree, is clearly like the Mets actually finishing off this collapse and missing the postseason, which was, I found even 3 weeks ago when they had like a 96% probability to make the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I thought as late as this weekend that they were still going to make the playoffs because, I'm not particularly wowed by the teams that were chasing them. I mean, the Reds were not a huge juggernaut or anything, and they gave the Mets plenty of chances, but the biggest roadblock to the Mets making the playoffs turned out to be the Mets. And, that's too bad for them because the season, as you said, really did start so well, and that they had the best record in baseball, and at that time, like they didn't even feel like they were playing particularly great to get there. It turns out they were way out over their skis at that time, and the pitching was, obviously they had some injuries in the rotation, etc. But it was all unsustainable, and then so many things went wrong this season for them, and they could never get their way out of it. And it's too bad because with all the expectations after signing Juan Soto, and it was a big deal the offseason, and there were a lot of high hopes for them, and it seemed like it was going to be a really good year, and ultimately we're here, which is like in the ashes of the season and autopsy and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, like, there's a lot of blame to go around here. I think I said a couple of different outlets that I feel like when you go from where they were to not making the postseason entirely in a year where it felt like the National League was very mediocre, like, it's an organizational failure. It's not one person to blame, but like, if you had to sort of like assess from like a overhead view, what do you feel like is the biggest reason why the Mets are not playing October baseball?
Well, look, I mean, I know that the blame game is a big deal after something like this, but to me, look no further than the players. They're the ones who failed. There's uh, mostly, I mean, there's failure all through. You're right about that. But to me, the biggest blame goes to the players. The roster, had enough big names. It had enough players. If some guys had played to the back of their baseball card, uh, as they say, they probably would have gotten in. I mean, it's funny because I think David Stearns would sort of fall into the number, second on the list of where blame should go, just because, they obviously the pitching setup didn't work. And the rotation ads they made didn't really pan out in the off season last year. And then the deadline. I thought he had a great deadline at the time, and it turned out now we have some 2020 hindsight, and it wasn't great. They added to what looked like their biggest problem at the time, the bullpen, and some pretty notable arms, and it didn't really pan out the way I think certainly the way they thought it would. Um, I mean, they really got saved by Nolan McLean, which also brings up the question, like, why wasn't he up earlier? Uh, if he had been up a month earlier, could that have gotten them into the playoffs? I don't know the answer to that. Nobody does. But he was so good when he got here, that you have to wonder if there's some sort of regret that they didn't bring him up for two more, three more starts. That could have impacted things because he was something special during this season.
Yeah, I think considering they tied the Reds and they needed one more win, and you figure McLean, they probably get one win in McLean. So I think the answer to that question is, but I think a clear yes, that if he's up earlier, they're in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, so many things went wrong, right? I mean, they didn't really hit, especially with runners in scoring position early on when they were playing well, and the guys that the Griffin Cannings of the world pitched well, and helped them early, and and then I look at August. which sort of that month kind of blows my mind because it's the best offensive month, I believe, in club history, and yet they were something like 11 and 17 during that month. You know, the starters didn't never went deep, and then the bullpen was overworked, and so there were all the ripple effects off of those things. You know, and then toward the end of the season, they really got sort of sloppy. They're not a good defensive team. They were making all kinds of mental mistakes, which opens up the idea. Then it's fair to ask, like, are you pressing because the postseason is hanging in the balance here? Is that why these things are happening? You know, so there were so many things that went wrong. I mean, Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, you know, if those guys had had representative years, we would be previewing, the Dodgers series right now, or maybe even previewing their week off, if those guys had soared to the heights that they've been in the past. And of course, they did not. And you know, I mean, there's going to be a lot of reevaluation, I think, and it'll be the off season is going to be fascinating in Queens.
Yeah, can I offer my personal theory onto where I think this really started to spiral out of control?
Sure.
Yeah, because something I've noticed in like a chat I had with a couple of friends of mine who are also Met fans, and it's like I feel like as they got off to the high, Senge hurts obvious, but I feel like there was a point in late June where the Mets were so far ahead in the standings, and they had all these injuries in rotation pop up, whether it was McGill, Griffin Canning, and there was a point that felt like the front office said, you know what? We're gonna be good. We're gonna be in the postseason. Who cares? We need these games. We'll bullpen here. We'll like pitch Paul Blackburn off of our rain delay here. Like there was sort of a lack of urgency, I felt like, to address their situation. Sort of like, we'll be fine. Look what the Dodgers do. They coast the regular season and they just get in October, flip a switch. We'll flip a switch when we get there. I wonder if that sort of lack of urgency, like waiting on McLean to pass certain bench points, like I wonder if that sort of pervades down to the point where you have the manager saying, we'll turn it on. The players are going to do the jobs. Like we have all the talent we need in the room. The players feel the same thing. And that mentality sort of created this complacency, which left them scrambling when they're like, oh, wait, we actually have to win now.
Well, there certainly was you heard it coming out of, excuse me, the clubhouse, the theory that, and this pervades every discussion about baseball and its postseason, not just among players, but just throughout anybody who loves baseball. You always talk about well, if we're hot at the right time. And that felt like it was more of a mantra, became a mantra to this team, well, we're not playing well right now, but if we're hot at the right time, that'll be great. And it's like, so maybe, maybe you've got something there that they were looking, I don't know if it were on purpose or unconsciously, but you look down the road and you see, well, just play our best baseball going into October. And of course, they didn't get there. And so now you're left with sort of those platitudes kind of hanging out there. I mean, it's just more emblematic of the failure of the season that was a discussion point when you didn't even close the deal on it. Look, I mean, I know there's a lot of criticism that they didn't acquire a starter at the deadline. And I get it. I thought bullpen was clearly the bigger deal at that point. Um, I'm stunned that Cedric Mullins was, as bad as he was as a Met. I thought he would help at least have, not be like a 900 OPS guy or anything like that, but someone who would impact a game or two or three with his varied skill set. And that didn't really happen either. He didn't play well as a Met. And, so it just all kind of, you wallpaper that over everything. And it just all looks bad now that it's come to this.
Yeah, it has here. And obviously, there's gonna be definitely some fallout here. We know that Steve Cohen will not fire David Stern after 2 years, after waiting 3 years to get him. We've heard your colleague Andy Martino SNY said that Carlos Mendoza is safe, but there should be changes to the coaching staff coming here. I feel like the thing I'm expecting more with the Mets is like I think that the culture in the locker room is going to change significantly because a lot of the guys in there are holdovers from prior to Stearns' tenure. And if you look back at the post Cohen ownership year, at least 4 or 5 years, they have wilted under pressure in big spots or collapsed or been too complacent and when things are going down. Like this year reminds me a lot of 21, where they had the big lead, got punched in the gut, and never came back. And you heard the same things kind of locker room, like, we're gonna be okay, we have all the talent we need, we'll win when it counts, and they didn't do it. So could you see a core shakeup, whether it's moving out multiple players, maybe not bringing back a Pete Alonso. You think like what kind of things do you think need to change for them to address this? You're not moving the manager.
Well, I mean, the first thing to me is that they need to acquire a horse of a pitcher to front the rotation. Look, I believe that Nolan McClain will be an ace at some point in his career. He already was the Mets ace basically as soon as he arrived. But I really think that they need to, via trade or free agency, get somebody who is going to be one of those sort of bona fide 200 innings guys. And then, then you can sort of add to the rotation beyond that. They've got a lot of young pitchers who they're very proud of, and rightfully so. They had a big year on the farm, so they have material to acquire one of those guys in a trade. Look what the Red Sox did with Garrett Crochet. If a Garrett Crochet comp is available over the winter, the Mets have to make a move to get him because that was a franchise changer for the Red Sox. It's probably the number one reason they're in the playoffs this year is that they got that guy and then he delivered. Now, in terms of culture and chemistry and interior, all that stuff, I mean, look, professional athletes as a whole are generally positive, forward-facing people because that's how they get through the failure that is part of their job. So I don't ding the Mets for, saying like we're going to be all right. I mean, maybe they're telling themselves that because that's what it takes for them to be all right, and that's fine. You know, I'm not into the pop psychology of sort of evaluating their whole, psyche and core when they say stuff like that is kind of lost on me a little bit. What else are they supposed to do? Fans seem to want players to wallow and, throw themselves down and cry over these things. They're not going to do that publicly in most cases. But, there is a fair question to be asked about where this core is headed after something like this. I wonder if guys who weren't here, who weren't brought in by David Stearns, who were here when he got here. I wonder if there's I don't know, there an appetite to move them. Maybe there's a necessity to move some of those guys in a way to improve the team as well. Look, I mean, we're obviously talking about the core of, Alonso, Nimmo, Lindor. I mean, Juan Soto is now here as a fixture. Jeff McNeil, guys like that. They've been part of the success of this team big time, clearly. But now going forward, is that also part of it? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with Alonso. He's earned the right to get out to free agency again. I wonder if Steve Cohen basically gets him back as kind of I don't know, olive branch, probably the wrong phrase to use, but like the Met fans came out this year. He asked them to come out to the ballpark. They did big time, and maybe retaining Pete, even though he's a wrong side of 30 first baseman, might be a way to say like, this is kind of a gift to the fans. Like, we love Pete, we want him back. We know you love Pete, we know you want him back, so he's back. Even though that might not be, the way the front office would look at it, certainly analytically, maybe you wouldn't do that. But Pete did have 80 extra base hits this year.
Yeah.
He is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that production is very hard to replace. And I do want to last thing sort of before we move on here is I know you mentioned the theory that like they should go get a big time innings pitcher. Like there's two components to this. Number one makes you think like that if they just had like a Jose Quintana type back, just giving them 5 innings every 5 days, like they don't have these problems they're in right now. Number two, like I think the big game target here, the pie in the sky, I know they linked to a lot of the Mariner guys. They could be linked to Sandy Alcantara. I wonder if I'm the Mets and if the Tigers flame out here in this round and Skubal can't agree with extension with the Tigers, if you're calling Detroit and seeing what it takes to get him out of there.
Well, the first thing it would take is Nolan McClain. Are you doing
Yeah,
that?
yeah, well, they won't do that, so I think they're gonna hang up the phone on you.
No, and they should. They shouldn't. The Mets shouldn't do that. I think they can get better without trading him. I mean, if you believe what you hear about their young players, they've got enough to get anybody without killing. I mean, trading Nolan McClain at this point would be a serious buzzkill. I mean, he was so amazing. But yeah, look, to me, and why not explore free agency? I know it's not perfect. I'm trying to think who's out there. I know Framber Valdez is a free agent. I wrote down a couple of names: Dylan Cease, Zach Gallen. That's just money. The Mets have money. Spend that money to get them. I know that it doesn't fit the Stearns model of the past couple of years of starting pitching, but Framber threw 192 innings this year. I don't know. I mean, he might be a good choice. Any of those guys would be, but they do need, I think they do need to. I know it takes a lot of pitchers to get through the season. And look, the risks are obvious. I wanted them to sign Corbin Burns last offseason. I would have been right until until he got hurt and then missed the rest of the season. That didn't work out. But I'm talking about somebody like that. To be the number one and to sort of bring all those young guys along with him would be a big boost to this team.
Yeah, for sure. Let's set to the Yankee side because they're actually still playing baseball, so we can't forget that. So obviously, like there was a point in the season they were both these teams are in trouble here. I think the flashpoint for the Yankees I think was like early August when they get swept in Miami, lose the first two in Texas, and like have a game lead for the third wild card. And big credit to the Yankees here down the stretch because they went 30 and 14 the rest of the way, tied the Blue Jays to the best record in the American League. And if they had won one more game, they would have won the division and had a bye and not been playing this week. So what do you make of the Yankee turnaround here? Because like unlike the Mets, who basically like stumbled and bumbled and like couldn't win games against like bad teams, the Yankees obliterated bad teams and showed earlier this month that they can't hold their own against some of the best in the American League.
Yeah, look, I think that Yankee fans will always cling to the idea, well, they only beat the bad teams. Well, I mean, that turned out to not be true toward the end of the season. They got some good wins against some good teams. And I know the Red Sox dominated the season series, but the Yankees won the last series that they played against them. So that's got to count for something. The Yankees are a tiebreaker away from being the number one seed in the league. That's not bad. You want to parse a bunch of games that they blew or that they were fundamentally unsound in and it cost them. Yeah, I mean, that happens to every team. The Mets are on line one to discuss that further as well. But what they did at the end, making a run at the division, playing really well. Obviously, the offense is going to be there, or at least in the regular season, it was there. They hit it. They led the world in home runs. They led the world in runs. Aaron Judge is the most unstoppable offensive force of our lifetimes. And, you go on from there. They had a Jazz Chisholm 30-30. Cody Bellinger had a great year. Trent Grisham was second on the team in home runs. We could go on and on here. But they really now have to, it's sort of unfair, not unfair, but it's sort of, maybe the worst matchup for them in the playoffs is the team that they're playing first, because the Red Sox Yankees rivalry gets a little bit of gas, adds a little gas to that series just because it is what it is. And, they've been so good against the Yanks this season, so it could end shockingly quickly for them, or they could be in the World Series again. I'm glad they cleaned up a little bit of their fundamental mistakes because that was really getting tiresome. What's that?
Yeah, it's like they fixed their defensive mistakes, and that's did not.
Yeah, right, exactly. And look, their bullpen isn't great. They revamped their bullpen at the deadline too, and that seemed like a great call. And it's been wobbly. I think they have the worst bullpen ERA out of any playoff team, since bullpens play such a huge role in the playoffs. Is that so? That's not such a great stat to have. Although I understand that the Will Warrens of the world may be called on in relief as well going forward here. So we'll see how that works out. Adds or subtracts to the pen. But look, I mean, if you hit home runs, you win games, generally speaking, and the Yankees were the best in baseball at hitting home runs. So that's a big skill to carry into October. We'll see if they can continue to do it. Well, I know Yankee fans are grinding on Aaron Judge's past postseason performances. It'd be great for him to have a big series. I mean, if he hits in that series, they're going to win the series.
Yeah, absolutely here. And they have this series of the Red Sox, the Wild Card Series at Yankee Stadium, which is always a help. So the good thing is, there's two of the things here is number one, the Yankees have not played in this round since Advantage. They've had to buy every time they've been in the postseason. So they need to see how they navigate that. And the key to this series, I feel like, is like they're gonna have to find a way to beat Crochet tonight.
Yeah.
I think if they do not beat Garrett Crochet, I think it's a very tough order for them to win the last two games like, in a row because I feel like we rarely see the team lose game one and go back and win the next two to keep their season alive. So I think tonight's the game I think that swings the whole series.
Yeah, Crochet is a monster, obviously. And look, I was looking up some stats earlier, and I think Aaron Judge is 3 for 15 against him. Two of the hits are home runs, but he's also struck out 11 times against him. Crochet's been very comfortable against the Yankees this year. I think they won all four of his starts. Boston did against the Yankees. So that it's going to be big. There's no question about it. And the Red Sox actually can piggyback off of him with a really good bullpen too. They were second in bullpen ERA in the majors this year. Old Yankee pal Aroldis Chapman had like a turn back the clock years. Got some microscopic ERA, and I think he held hitters to like a 132 average. So it's not like, if Crochet goes deep, it's not going to get much easier after that. So yeah, game one is huge.
Yeah, like what do you think is the big key to this series here for the Yankees and Red Sox besides the Crochet thing?
I mean, look, I'm not trying to heap all the pressure on Aaron Judge, but I do think that he's got to impact it in a positive way offensively. I know the Yankees, we discussed a lot of the other options they have, and they do have a lot of other guys who can help get it done. I just think that it would sort of center the Yankees in really this amazing way if he were to come up in the first inning of game one and hit one to the moon off a Crochet. Uh, and I think that they would roll from that. So I think Judge is the key. At some point, I've always believed this, that he's going to wreck a series. He's going to wreck an entire postseason. He's just too good. But it's really hard also because you're not facing bad teams. You're not facing the worst relievers anymore. It's the pitching is better, just because the better pitchers are pitching more, and so it's difficult. But at some point, he's gonna go crazy and drive the Yankees forward.
Yeah, and let's talk real quick here. Assuming the Yankees get through this series is again not a guarantee, considering like that the Boston's had their number for a while here. Like they look at Toronto in the ALDS, and Toronto was clearly taking on water down the stretch. The Yankees won eight in a row, basically forced them to hang on by the skin of their teeth in the division. They have major pitching issues here. Like I feel like if the Yankees can get through this series, they have a chance to go pretty deep again.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that, and that's why this was like if they could have played anyone else in the first round, it would have been it would have been more ideal. Like it's almost like robs the baseball fan of a longer series, or a potential longer series between the Red Sox and the Yankees too, which would just add, would multiply the drama and the rivalry by whatever. If it were a 5 game series or a 7 game series, it would be even more theater for us to all enjoy, as well as really good baseball, or what we presume to be really good baseball on tap here. So yeah, but I do think that if they beat the Red Sox, and I do think they're going to beat the Red Sox here, but going forward after that, I think they've got a real opportunity. And for a long time this season, their fans certainly thought that that was not going to happen, and they were raging against this, Aaron Boone that, and Anthony Volpe, and all the fist shaking that the Yankee fan could muster, was going on, and now here they are, tied for they tied for the best record in the league, and the playoffs are opening up in front of them, and they've got a real chance.
Yeah, certainly do here. Took like quick rapid fire on the other three series here. Obviously, let's start out like with the AL Central like rematch, like the Cleveland Detroit series, which Nobody would have seen that coming. Not only would Cleveland be in the playoffs, they'd be hosting the series against Detroit.
Yeah, that what they did was amazing. And I feel like, in some of these cases this year, we've seen some teams that traded guys, then make runs, and in some cases, like Cleveland, make the playoffs. I wonder what the trade deadline is going to look like going forward across baseball, just because, the add and subtract, or, sell but be better, you know, sometimes works apparently. I wouldn't have predicted that, but kudos to the Guardians for rolling up and getting that done. But you mentioned this guy before. Tarek Skubal is something else, and does that give Detroit an advantage in that series, or are they still smarting from getting caught? So there's all kinds of psychological ramifications there. Skubal should be an advantage, but who knows what's to say, what's in the Tigers' minds now that it all worked out this way.
Yeah, and of note here, they won 5 out of 6 against them this month, and I think they beat Schoolboy at least one of those games. So that's something the Guardians probably have confidence wise.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, the NL series start with the Cubs Padres. Certainly, and like it feels like two teams that like could either go all the way or like get swept and look like incompetent here. So I feel like there's almost no in between those two.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Padres in this series. I love the bullpen. I, the Padres always seem like this slumbering giant, that you're kind of scared of a little bit, and maybe this is the year they sort of get it done. The Cubs are a good club, but I kind of like San Diego in that one. And then we'll see going forward what they can get done after that.
Yeah. Go this about the Mets should have been in the Reds Dodgers series, and I think like LA obviously very vulnerable this year. Their bullpen has not been great. They've had a lot of pitching injuries, though the stars seem to be healthy now. Like the one thing I'll say in this series, the Dodgers should win it, but like the thing that would scare you if you're LA is that like the Reds have very good starting pitching options, and
Yeah,
that's something I feel like, especially in that 3 game series, they've seen anybody could win 2 out of 3, like in the
right.
situation. So like it's here, like if you're Cincinnati, say, okay, we got Hunter Green, we got Abbott, we got Lodolo, we have all these guys. Like if they can shut this lineup down and like we can scratch out 3 runs, we can win twice and like send the champs home.
Yeah, the way you just described it is a great explanation for why teams should do almost whatever they can to get the bye, because there is no reason to subject your team to a potential pitfall of a 2 out of 3, because you're right, anyone can beat anyone 2 out of 3. I like the Dodgers a lot. I know they had a rough year for them, but I feel like, other than Otani, no one had a spectacular season on offense. Some guys emerged, Pages, that kind of stuff, but Mookie Betts wasn't phenomenal. Freddie Freeman didn't have an ace Freddie Freeman year. Like, is something coming around the bend for them in October, and are they going to now rampage through the National League? I mean, they've certainly got a collection of talent that could do that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, whenever you have starting pitching, and if their bullpen, I know was pitching well toward the end of the year as well for the Reds. So anything can happen. I mean, I wouldn't predict the Reds win, but they could put a scare in the defending champs. But I like the Dodgers pretty heavy to get back to the World Series, to be honest.
Yeah, I think his thing with this postseason setup here, and number one, I think like if you were a fan of like the of not having a salary cap in the league, I think it's a great argument for you to say, hey, like in this system with the luxury tax, the Mets missed the playoffs while Cleveland, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Cincinnati all made it. That's a tough argument to be made for the cap when you have 4 small markets getting in over a team like the Mets. And I think also this year that we've seen there's no real dominant team, possibly outside of Milwaukee, who style I'm not convinced is going to convey in the postseason again because they rely too much on stringing runs, which is hard to do when you run this elite pitching here. Like, do you feel like this is like sort of a wide open scenario here where anybody who's in here outside maybe the Reds could win it?
Yeah, look, the Brewers have been really good at making the postseason, and they haven't been good at doing much else in the postseason. And But this year they were tremendous this year, and I wonder, like is this the year that they put it together in October and at least make a really nice run? I don't know. They do a lot of different things well. I think they're relentless in a way. All Major League Baseball teams ought to be relentless because that's a lofty goal that you don't have to be a guy who can hit 60 home runs to be relentless as a team. I've watched them play a couple of games this year. The Brewers, where they've been awful for 4 innings. They've made an error and they've fallen behind, and then they just come roaring back like nothing has happened. There's no head hanging. There's none of that kind of stuff for them. So maybe their doggedness will help this time, and they can prove to the world that they really are the best team in baseball. I mean, if I would never have predicted that they would have had the most wins in the game this year, and yet here we are. They're resting up, and other teams are scrambling to get out of a short, potentially perilous series. So kudos to the way the Brewers handled things. Now they've got to show everyone something, though, too.
Absolutely, Anthony. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. People want to follow social media, keep up with your baseball coverage. How can they do that?
I'm on X, Twitter, at Anthony McCarron, SNY.TV. I'll be on some of the programming. I'm going to cover the Yankees series for the website. So it should be some fun here. Hopefully, it's an interesting October all the way around. I have a feeling it will be.
Yeah, hopefully by this time next year, they're talking about both teams in the playoffs, not just the Yankees.
Yeah, no kidding.